Welcome to the Strackhouse, a show about inspiring women making change. I'm your host, Sarah Strackhouse. Join us to hear their incredible stories. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for season 3 of the Strackhouse. We are so excited. This season we are featuring badass women, and of course we just had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. We hope everyone had a great time. Thank you to those who served and are serving currently. We would not be the country that we are without you. And in light of that, I thought one of our first guests that would be pretty cool to bring on, Janine Stange. She is of course famous for singing the Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem, in all 50 states. Janine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Sarah. This is fun. I get to see you again.
I know. So a while back, before quarantine periods, she was here and she gave a speech, and I probably cried 2 or 3 times, was like laughing my butt off. I mean, and of course, you know, she's another New Yorker, so a girl after my own heart. So first off, I want to tell you, or I want to ask you about singing in all 50 states. I mean, how did that even come to start?
I think it came a little bit from a position of, well, what can I do? Well, it came a lot from that. I always sang, but there was a lot of turmoil in the music industry. The music industry was not what it was when I was a kid, looking at other people who, you know, achieved all this great stuff. And when I started to try to knock on the doors of things, it was sort of it was very different from what I thought it would be. And I still knew I wanted to sing. And I used to always say, you know, when I make it big, when I become this big philanthropic artist, like all the people that I looked up to when I was younger, then I'm going to start to give back. And one day I just said, well, what if I never make it big? Will I ever give back? And just started to think of what I could do. And I loved singing the anthem. It was also, I will admit, a lot easier than putting a band together. I had done a number of albums. And this was just something I said, you know what, this is simple. I will go out and sing. I'll use my voice to honor our nation's heroes and just put one foot in front of the other. So
I love that.
Yeah, it kind of was, it evolved.
And I know that patriotism was rooted in you from a young age. Can you tell me about your parents' place? And I know you said that your mom was a huge influence in that.
Yes. My parents owned a bagel shop, which you would totally relate to, being a New Yorker. You know, it's kind of like stereotypical, but so I grew up working in my parents' bagel shop, and I watched my mom from a very early age show so much respect. She never sat me down and said, you have to be respectful to our military and our police or anything like that. First responders, it was more just me seeing how she, and I always say this, she made them feel like $1 million. And it was something that I just always felt this strength from, you know, seeing that my mom did that. And I always just said, well, I don't own a bagel shop, nor do I ever want to, but I can use my voice. And whenever I sing that song, I will purpose to put everything else out of my head and focus on the fact that there could be a veteran, there could be somebody who's in the military or a family member who can, you know, hears that song, and a lot of times it brings back memories for them, and, you know, just it helps them in some way. So I just tried to make it all about them.
I love that. Do you remember the first time you sang the national anthem? What was that like?
Yes, yes. And there is a documentary on Amazon Prime where you can literally watch me go through all the 50 states, but also talk about all this. I remember it was, first of all, I was very shy, and I did not sing. I didn't tell anybody I could sing. I would sing in my basement when I was a kid, and my brother would open the basement door and tell me to shut up and slam the door.
Siblings, I love them.
Yeah, but back then, you know, what older brother is when you're a kid?
Exactly.
So I finally mustered enough courage to sing the national anthem for a homecoming game. It was actually the first song I sang in public. And I'll never forget, I was so nervous that after I finished, I will use this bottle to explain. I was holding the microphone so tightly that when I finished, my hand was literally stuck. I couldn't open it from the nerves. And I remember walking over to my mom and saying, I cannot open my hand. And it's a lesson that I've learned, is how, fears and doubts can really just stop you. And you just have to keep going, and you have to keep going back at it and back at it. And now, singing national TV in front of 100,000 people, it doesn't do that to me.
That's incredible. Well, and I know that you've taken that passion and kind of that whole momentum, and now you're motivational speaking, and you're out there, and you were at least out there on the circuit. Tell me what that was like and why you wanted to do that so much. And I can, again, speak from experience. I mean, when you spoke to us, I mean, there was so much emotion in your conversation. There was so much emotion in the crowd. I mean, we were all crying and laughing.
Well, I pump onion gas.
Right. Tear gas.
I had you all cut onions. You didn't remember that part. I started speaking. It had a couple of reasons that it started happening, and that was after I finished that journey. You sort of go through, and this maybe a lot of your audience can relate. Like when you hit a goal, sometimes you forget that part where they say the journey validates the arrival, because when you get there, you're looking, it's like when you get to the top of any kind of like, let's go to the top of this tower, let's go to the top of this. When you get there, yes, you got a great view, but it's like, okay, now what?
Right.
Now what? And I went through a couple months where I was saying, now what? And I will never forget it. I was asked to sing at an event, and I was driving back. So this was when I lived in LA. So it was in Palm Springs. I think it was in Palm Springs. So I was driving back and thinking of just different things of how I would end up talking to people, because they would ask me about that journey. Yeah. And I would be talking to these people like you couldn't shut me up. And people were like, these are great stories. There's a lot of stuff in here that you could help other people with. And then it clicked one day. I was in traffic driving back. I think it was on the 10. And I just said, there was this one gentleman, his name was Cliff. He was a 92-year-old World War II veteran. He stormed Normandy on D-Day. And I asked him to give me advice that I could pass on to younger kids. And I realized I told him I would do that, and I hadn't done it. And I said, for him, I'm going to start telling his story. And then I started adding a lot of stuff that I realized was really important. And that was the things that led me to go on that mission, the things that led me to abandon my comfort zones, that things that led me to let go of my fears and my doubts were things that I realized everybody could relate to. Yes, my situation was different, but we're all in that same zone all the time, which is the choices that you make. Are you going to let this stop you? Are you going to clench on to things that you should really be letting go of, and then be able to see some amazing things in your life, and more importantly, make an impact? So I started speaking really because of Cliff, and then I realized I had a lot of other stuff that I could share to help other people.
Yeah, and I don't know if you just answered this, you might have, but do you have one favorite moment? I mean, was it meeting Cliff, or is there a few things or one thing that really sticks out to you from your journey?
There are so many things, and I think that's why the documentary works really well, because I would find myself, I get asked that question a lot, and a lot of times I would be like, well, I'll tell you a couple stories, and then like the Q&A session of the speaking part would be, overtime. So now I could actually tell people, go watch the movie, because all of the great stories, I mean, there's a story about meeting someone who escorted the remains of one of his friends who was killed in action home. I met him in Spokane airport, and actually connected with the person who was killed in action. His mom, I connected with his mom, and now I know a lot more about him. So there are so many different things that happen along the way that the movie really kind of encompasses. There were fun things. I got to fly a plane. I got to a small plane.
Still, it's a plane.
An actual plane. But I'll never forget these experiences, because again, had I not taken steps out of my comfort zone, these great things and these lessons wouldn't have happened. So there's a whole bunch of stories like that in the documentary. National Anthem Girl is what you Google. If you go to, well, you actually just pushed Amazon Prime, maybe pull that up, and then National Anthem Girl. I don't know why. There's no coffee in this, and that's probably why I'm not making too much sense.
Right. And we'll make sure to put that in the captions, because I want to make sure that people watch it, because, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's definitely pretty cool. I love that. Well, and I know that, like I said, that whole journey turned into motivational speaking. And I think we were talking before, and you said that when you came here in, what was that, maybe February? That was probably one of the, March.
Like one of my second to last event before all the events postponed.
Yeah. So what's it been like? Everything coming to a screeching halt now.
I was on track. This was my busiest. I had 3 times the events that I had any other year, and I literally watched them all get postponed. Right after I had another event in Vegas, and then I got home from Vegas on the 12th, and I just knew that was it. You know, everybody was starting to call, and they were having to change their events. So I kind of, again, experiencing a comfort zone. I was comfortable with being on the road nonstop. And then being home, it's like, well, what am I going to do?
Right.
And how am I going to continue to do what I do? Because you just can't put everything on pause that makes you feel like you're actually giving, you know, or contributing. Right. And we ended up going up to my in-laws for 3 months to kind of help them out, make sure they didn't have to go out and whatnot. And sitting there kind of, I had done enough. I baked a lot. I did all these other things. And
did you make any bagels?
Huh?
Did you make any bagels?
I did not. I made biscotti. I made a ton of that, and that was a lot of fun. But it was actually good, I think, in a way to kind of take a little bit of a mental break. And there was one thing that I never liked doing. I just don't know why. I like live speaking, but I never like to say, like, I'm going to do this virtually. Yeah. And obviously my speaking bureau was like, well, some of these events are translating into virtual, which was fine. Which was fine for me to do. But I started to think, you know, I could probably do a virtual show. Right. And I didn't want to. I was kind of like putting it back. Again, my fears and my doubts. If you listen to my talk, like immediately after you have this idea, there's like, oh, but this, and who's going to want to watch it, and blah, blah, blah. And then I just, I'm on air every Thursday with Flash Phelps, Sirius XM Channel 6. And he and I were kind of talking that all of his listeners were stuck at home, and it had to be some way that we could get them all together. And then out of that thought and a couple other, like, okay, how are we going to do this logistically? We started a show called Live Stream in Quarantine with Flash and Janine. And we have this very funny but really cool live stream show, and we do it every Thursday at 7 p.m. And it took me out of a comfort zone because I don't like to stare at a camera and know people are literally staring at me. I like to kind of walk around and stuff. Right. But doing it, we were able to raise thousands of dollars for charity, and we were able to really get people who would otherwise be stranded by themselves. They were starting to connect with each other. So we just ended that live stream in quarantine segment, and we're going to start it more permanent and just call it Live Stream with Flash and Janine every Thursday on Facebook Live at 7 p.m. Eastern. But that's what I've been doing. And the thing about it is, it's allowed me to keep going with my message, with all the things that I'm doing, instead of just taking a step back and, you know, going, well, this is, I don't know for how much longer, and feel like the victim, because all of us, I think, have done very well as saying, well, there's many people who are way worse in a situation. So it also gave me some time to really be grateful and say, well, look, the things that I could complain about are things that I would never complain about. And I'm grateful for what I have and the opportunities that I had live. I don't know when we're going to be back in person. I'm doing a lot of virtual speaking as well. I'm doing a lot of virtual events.
Well, and I know you speaking right now is still continuing to get out your message, and that's so important. I mean, I know when you were here, everyone was so excited. I mean, people cried, laughed. Like I said, everyone took something away from that, and I think everyone made jump starts. I know I did in my personal life. I know I decided to make a change.
Wow.
And I think that you getting that message out still is so important and so great for people to hear. Because I remember you saying, oh, okay, your mentality used to be that you would wait until a certain point to start giving back, and now you're just giving and you decided, no, I'm not going to wait to give back.
And I think that the important thing about it, the thing that sort of helps you surmount your comfort zones and your fears and your doubts, is if you truly believe in the message that you need to get out. Right. If it's sort of something that you adopted because someone else was doing it, or someone told you you should do it, or it just looked like the thing that was out there that was like current at the time, you're not going to fight against all of your fears and your doubts and all the hurdles tooth and nail if you do not 100% have passion about it. A lot of times people say, well, keep your passions for your hobbies. That's fine. But if you can find a way to really say, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't care what you do. It doesn't have to be speaking. It doesn't have to be what you're doing. You don't have to be in PR. It's whatever. If it's you being a mom, if it's you being out there on the front lines, what's your reason? What's your why? And nothing else will matter if you know that. So because I had all this, it's been speaking for years, on all this stuff, I'm like, well, if I'm going to just take a siesta here and not do anything, I'm a hypocrite. I got to push myself at it. So I don't like to set up a bunch of lights, and I don't like to talk to a green light. I don't like it, but I do it because I believe in what I have to say. And I think that is what helps blow away all of the other things. But if you sit there and you, what do they say, conversate with your fears and your doubts, they'll just keep growing.
I love that. And I love that confidence. And I know you said that might not have always been there for you, but if someone's wondering, they're out there, they're watching, and they're wondering, how do I build that confidence? How do I get out there and take that step? What would you tell them?
I tell them what I tell everybody in my talks, and we did it at your talk too. First of all, there is a quote, and I don't know if I have one of the postcards, but I will tell it to you. It's do what you can with what you have where you are. The thing that caused me years of going around a mountain instead of blowing that mountain down was me thinking I had to wait until something happened, something very ambiguous would happen, making it big. For me, what does make it big mean? And once you get to that plateau, you're going to see a whole bunch of other things that you're going to want to do. And that thing, that core thing, that there's resistance always on the other side of the things that you're supposed to be doing. And I kept saying, well, I need to be a multimillionaire. I need to be, on the top of the charts. I need to be blah, 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 blah. And this thing, this give back part, this why, was just sitting there like fading in the wind, or whatever you want to say. I don't have a good phrase for that. But anyway, the point is, it was dwindling. And the thing that happened was when I stopped making all these excuses that, when this happens, I just started to say, well, no, I'm not some big famous artist. And it doesn't matter. You look at other people that have made huge impacts and they weren't anyone. No one even knew their name. And that's fine. Harry S. Truman says, what a great thing that we could all do if no one cares who gets the credit. That's so important. So anyway, what I would tell anybody is what my mom always would say is, if you're going to do anything, the most important thing is start today. Start small. It's not about, I want to give $1 million to charity. Sometimes it's the worst thing to do is say how much money you want to give, or say how much a quantity of it, rather than saying, well, what does that look like? Is it me maybe starting something small in my community? And then it starts to grow. But we always are looking at the end result, and you cannot take one step and it be on the ground or the base camp and then it be on top of Mount Everest. Your foot doesn't range that far, and neither do you. Emotionally, there's a lot of things you need to grow. I will tell you, I was a different person from state 1 to state 50. And I am grateful for all of that. And when you know that you're going to set a goal, it's so important to know that that's nice. But now, what are the other things? It's like, I want to make an oatmeal cookie. That's great. But you have to do you have milk and oats and butter and eggs, or if you make it healthy, bananas? Yeah. Do you have all that? If you don't, you need to go get it. And that means you got to get your keys. And it means you got to go sit in the car and put your mask on when you go into the grocery store. And then you got to go get the stuff. It's steps. Everything is steps.
Well, and you've talked about your mom a bunch, and I know that she was a huge part of your life. I mean, she's so intertwined. If she were here now, what would she say? How proud would she be of you?
I mean, I think she would be very, she was somebody that gave you the encouragement and gave you the reasons why it worked, and made you realize that there were a lot of roots, there were always things that would happen, and she would see things, whether it was in, the news or just in people's lives that we would see. And she would go, this happened because of this. And she would always kind of like trace it back. And I think what she would say to me is, what you're doing now happened because you left behind a lot of the things that were always holding you back. Because I talk about this in my talks. When we were driving one day to the airport, she was taking me back. It was after the holidays. And she asked me, like, why are you out in LA? Like, do you remember why you moved out in the first place? Because I was living in LA. And I'm from New York, so that's a big difference for anybody who comes from New York. And Italian moms, they don't like you leaving, like 5-foot radius. But the point is that she was challenging me because she knew that there were a lot of things in my life that I was doing, and she could see it from a different perspective, that I was really stuck. Even though I was going all over the place, I really wasn't going anywhere, and she could see that. So I think she would say, well, you made a lot of adjustments, and now you're getting to see, the results of that.
I love that. I love that. Look she's intertwined in your speech the whole time.
And I love that because I feel like I'm always with her. I'm always talking about her, even before I started speaking. In fact, I remember my husband and I were having a conversation, and I was coming up with content for my talks. And I remember thinking, well, I got to twine all this stuff. And he's like, you really should be talking about your mom, because throughout the day, I'll always be like, well, my mom would say this. My mom would do it this way. It's like she's always there.
Well, and you're so right. I mean, I have an Italian mom. She's from New York. I mean, if you just know, you just get it.
You just get it. You just get it. You don't have to talk. It's like, oh yeah, okay.
Well, Janine, I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a weird one, so if you need a second to think about it. If I knew you better, what would I ask you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Does it have to do with it doesn't matter?
I mean, just anything. If anyone's watching this, women, man, I mean, anyone, what do you really want them to take away from it?
I think I would say, this is a conversation that I've been having with a bunch of people, and I think maybe it's important around now, is if you look back, those things that influenced you back in the day and the people that influenced you to do certain things because you cared so much about what they thought. If I could tell you, think now, we're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with a pandemic, and we've all been leveled. And no one really cares about all the things they told you in the past because it's all been changed. The paradigm has shifted. And I would say, take these times. Yes, things are opening back up and whatnot, but make sure you don't re-immerse back into the world, and hopefully it does go back to some sense of normal, without taking, even if it's just an hour or 30 minutes, to recenter, recalibrate, and make sure some of the things that have influenced your life are not because it's somebody that just flippantly said something to you and you just thought you had to go on this trajectory. I did that a lot. I did that a lot. And I think that if we all just kind of boiled ourselves down and distilled a little bit to say, well, what's my true core values, and what are the true things that now moving forward, when we saw that life changed in an instant for all of us at the same time, there's a lot more empathy that we can have. And I think there's a lot more concentration of purpose, because you start to see the things that really matter.
That really is great advice. Thank you. Well, Janine, if anyone wants to find out more about you, about your speaking engagements, what's the best way to do it?
They could go to my website, JanineStange.com. It's JanineStange.com. I will say that If you are looking for motivation via virtual, we're doing that now. And if you have kids or yourself that would like to help the military in just some missions that I do, you can go to the Join tab. So it's JanineStange.com/join. And, or you could text USA to 33777. That'll help you out. Everybody could do things on their phones nowadays. And also, just if you have any questions, reach out to me on my website. There's a contact page. You can follow me on social media. You've got all my links. And yeah, that's it. But thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I mean, when I saw you speak, I knew I was like, I have to get her on.
Oh, you're so nice. Well, you know, it's that neither of us really sounded like we were from New York during this whole time, but we could totally bring that New York accent back in.
Well, I always say, you know, if I get mad, you know, I'll tell you, my husband will tell you, when I get really mad, that Jersey or that New York will come out real quick.
Yes, I tell people that. I say, you're not going to hear my accent except if you make me mad or I'm talking about my family.
Yes, exactly. Or when I'm talking to my family.
Yes.
Yeah, it always gets like really excited and hyped up, and then it also gets really loud.
Yeah, they're like, who are you just talking to? Because you hung the phone up and now you're still talking like you're from Long Island.
Yeah, exactly. You got loud.
Yes, we're getting louder too.
Oh, I love it. Well, Janine, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Well, don't forget, you can find us on all of your streaming services for audio platforms, as well as your YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, of course. And this is all Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central Time. And we have a lot of wonderful guests, so we'll make sure to see you next week. If you'd like to nominate an inspiring woman, email me at sarahstrackhouse@gmail.com. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.